So thank you for that. So before I introduce our keynote speaker, I'd like to touch a little bit on something that makes CPI really special as an organization, and that is that what we offer is political clarity. We're not LARPing as a political party. We know we're not that, but we really offer something special, and that's political clarity in a time where things are very, very, very crazy. And last year, something pretty disturbing happened, I'm sure you all remember, and that is Brian Thompson, the CEO of an insurance company, was assassinated. He was murdered on the streets of New York City in cold blood. It was a political assassination. And I'm not here to defend Brian Thompson. I don't think he was a very good person, and he contributed to the suffering of thousands and thousands of people. But all of a sudden, he was killed, and the internet is flooded with all this talk of this love for the person who allegedly did it, Luigi Mangione. And he's so handsome and good looking, and I'm not even sure that Luigi Mangione did it. I have a lot of questions. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense. Yeah. All the pictures we've seen, I don't know. But the internet was not flooded with that. It was flooded with, he did it. And that's awesome. I love murder. And even though it was unpopular, and we wouldn't have gotten as many likes and shares and retweets if we had said, Luigi Mangione is so awesome, thank you, internet. Instead, we decided to publish a book, and we published The Danger of an American Years of Lead. And it makes an argument that used to be really, really standard on the left. It used to be something that I would think is common sense, and that's that left adventurism is bad, and terrorism is also bad, and that isolated acts of political violence are not the answer. There's actually, in the classic American novel, The Grapes of Wrath, it's one of my favorite, novel about how suffering changes people. There's a part of that talks exactly about this. And there's a farmer, and he's on his property, and somebody who's hired by the bank to foreclose on his home is basically bulldozing his home. And he comes out with his gun, and he has a conversation with the person who's about to bulldoze his home. And he says, get off my property or I'm going to shoot you. And the person who's bulldozing his home says, well, what would that solve? They would just call the sheriff. And he says, well, then I'd shoot the sheriff. And he said, okay, but then they would just hire another cop. And they go through person after person after person, all the way up to the CEO of the company, of the bank that wants to bulldoze his home. And he explains to him, well, even if you were to kill the CEO of that bank, they're just going to put somebody in who would do the exact same thing because they're being paid. That's all the system can produce. The problem is not any one individual. It's the system. There's no person who you can go out and shoot. And there was this extremely disturbing trend where the ruling class, for whatever reason, has decided that we need political violence. And it was made more and more clear with the assassination of Charlie Kirk. This was just a few months ago. And I don't agree with Charlie Kirk about very much. He was right about like 1.5 issues, I would say. But he was pretty good on those 1.5 issues. But he was killed, and the memo went out to the left on the internet. And they said, we need to celebrate this. And we need to be really shrill, and we need to go on there. And this guy was just violently murdered on the internet, shot in the neck in cold blood in front of a crowd of people, in front of his wife and kids. And we need to go out there and celebrate and cheer and look like a bunch of crazy people. And then the memo got sent out to the right that said, the left is trying to kill you. And I don't blame them for being upset at the idea that half the country is trying to kill them. And this is a culture of political violence, and it's not coming from below. This is not organic, because the internet is controlled by forces who are not organic. It's controlled by the State Department. We know this. The Hillary Clinton State Department has been using regime change, using social media for regime change all around the world for years and years and years. It's coming from above. And that's because the system that we live in, the system of globalism, imperialism, is in a profound crisis. It's collapsing. It can't sustain itself any longer. We've been in a depression since like 2008, and they just can't seem to fix their system. They can't seem to adapt to AI. And there's a danger that factions within dissident MAGA, within elements of the ruling class, who may want to pull away from NATO. And that represents a huge challenge to the foreign policy establishment in the United States. And they did the very same thing in Italy, where you had the Christian Democrats and the Communist Party came together to form a coalition and decide that they wanted Italy to be a sovereign country, and they wanted to pull out of NATO. And what happened? The CIA did Operation Gladio, and they decided that they were not going to go in there with a violent US occupation like was done in Greece. That was the first instance of napalm being used on civilians. Instead, they were going to fund the Red Brigades, who were a group of communist terrorists, and they didn't say, well, we support the USA. They said, well, we're the real communists. And if you were a real communist, you would go out and you would break the legs of the Communist Party and anybody who wants to pull out of NATO. And a similar thing happened in Jamaica. They elected Michael Manley, who was sort of like a Bernie Sanders kind of figure in Jamaica, and he hired Donald Harris, actually Kamala Harris's father, who was a Marxist economist. And it looked like he was going to be friendlier to Cuba, to be friendlier to the anti-imperialist world. And what happened? They created the Shower Posse, a violent gang, to begin breaking people's legs and shooting them. And people became afraid to get political. And that's what they want to do. They want to make it so that people are afraid to be political. And you know, there's been a lot of talk about why was it that Charlie Kirk was killed, and people try and find justifications. Well, maybe it was about this and that. I'm not going to speculate, but one thing is very clear. It's that in spite of, you know, what you think about what Charlie Kirk said or believed, he was encouraging young people to get political. He was going to college campuses and having conversations with people, and there were thousands and thousands of young people in this country who looked up to Charlie and who believed that they should begin to be active, and that's something that cannot happen. They need us to fight amongst themselves so that they can rule by default. But none of the leftist groups could even say that the murder of Charlie Kirk was wrong. The Party of Sellouts and Liberals, PSL, released a statement, and they called Charlie Kirk a white supremacist, and they said he deserved to die, which I'm sure goes over really well with half the population who are terrified that you are going to kill them, say, yeah, and that person who you all looked up to, he deserved it. And you know, these people, they're not really organizers. You know, these internet fan clubs that call themselves communist parties in the United States, they're snake oil salesmen. Are folks familiar with the term snake oil salesman? Well, actually, I'm going a little bit deeper with the term snake oil salesman. A lot of people don't know where the term comes from. So snake oil is actually a part of traditional Chinese medicine. A lot of people don't know this, but the water snake in China, it produces a kind of oil that actually acts as like an anti-inflammatory. And so people would put, like when the Chinese immigrants would come to build the railroads across the United States, they would put it on their joints, and it kind of acted like it soothed them after a long day of work. So why did we get this idea that snake oil is a scam? Well, there was this guy, and his name was Clark Stanley, and he called himself the Rattlesnake King, that's not even the right kind of snake to get snake oil from. But he would do these elaborate shows, and he would go around the country, and he would say, this snake oil, it's going to cure your ills. And he would take rattlesnakes, and he would throw it in a boiling pot, and he would say, it's going to solve all your problems. This snake oil, you just need to buy it from me. It'll serve all your problems. It's a cure oil. And some muckraking journalist came along, and they revealed, this is crazy, there wasn't any snake oil. Not only did it not help anybody, but there wasn't actually any snake oil in the product that he was selling. But if you ask the average person, you guys all know snake oil is a scam. Don't buy snake oil. And it's a very similar situation because the two have become synonymous. I know that snake oil is a scam, and so if I were to come up to you and tell you, well, actually it's a part of traditional Chinese medicine and you should buy snake oil from me, you'd look at me like I'm a crazy person. I would sound ridiculous. And I say that the DSA and the PSL and all of these socialist groups that speak in the name of the red flag, that wave the red flag to oppose the red flag, I say that they're snake oil salesmen. And that to go around trying to correct people about, well, actually, socialism doesn't mean what all of these people who say they're socialists think it believes. It actually means this other thing and it's like anti-imperialism and about managing the economy. You sound like a crazy person to them because they're like, well, I just talked to Mamdani over there and he told me socialism means I get free stuff and get to be really mad at rich people. That's what that means. I mean, it means that I get to really hate Republicans and think that they're all bad people and that I'm a super duper Democrat. So why would I go around and call myself a socialist? I'm a lot smaller than a lot of those people. Those groups are very big because they're being boosted by the establishment. And that's why we at the Center for Political Innovation have had our innovationist turn. I'm an innovationist, and I'm an innovationist because I believe in economic growth. I'm an innovationist because I stand with the oppressed and the exploited all around the world, because I want a society where the last shall be first and the first shall be last, because we believe that we need a government of action that fights for working families. That is absolutely what we need right now. We need a government that will stand up to Wall Street, to the billionaires that are keeping our country poor, starting wars all around the world. That's what socialism means to me. That's what innovation means to me. And that we need to build a movement of ordinary Americans that are going to oppose this imperialist system, that are going to oppose the bankers that say, Maduro is not my enemy, Wall Street is my enemy. That says, Russia is not my enemy, Wall Street is my enemy. And that it doesn't matter who's in the White House, we need to oppose this system.